Hello guys, welcome back to the channel, and as you guys can tell, we were talking about the New York Rangers again with my man and Statboy Steven. Statboy Steven, if you guys don't know, is a huge New York Rangers fan. He has his own podcast talking about the Rangers. I will have it on the description down below. He's been on the channel for previous videos that have done really well, as we have had hour-plus long discussions, and this video turned out to be an hour-and-a-half plus long. It was ridiculous, but we had so much fun breaking down the New York Rangers and what their future holds for the 2021 season, their expectations. So we really break down basically what we assume the lines are going to be, lines 1 through 4 on the offense and then 1 through 3 on the defense, and obviously the goaltending, and how we think all these players are going to fare between the rookies and Lafreniere and Shesterkin, and obviously the veterans and Panarin, Zibanejad, Kreider, etc., and everything in between there is to know about the Rangers, and our ultimate expectation for how they are going to fare and the new division setup for the shortened 56-game season. So as always guys, make sure you stay all the way till the end of the video, grab popcorn, get yourself comfortable, whatever you need to do, fellow Ranger fans out there watching this, and also make sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you end up enjoying this kind of hockey content. If you want to see more content like this going forward, I know it is lengthy, but trust me, if you're a Rangers fan, if you're interested for a long conversation, then this is the place to be right now. So thank you all so much in advance guys. Now let's get right into this conversation. All right, Steven, thank you so much for being back on the channel. I know it's been a while, but I've been thinking about you a lot lately, to be perfectly honest, because I've been wanting to talk about the Rangers, and you are my Ranger go-to guy. So first of all, give yourself another intro. Let us know where we can find you, among other things, for all the lovely people that don't know yet.
Yeah, I'm Steven on Twitter. I'm known as statboy_Steven. So if you want anything about Ranger prospects mostly, just hit me up, give me a follow, and I post daily Ranger prospect schedules and recaps for the prospects that play in Europe and in college. So until the NHL season starts, if you feel like you want to watch some hockey, my schedules will definitely be worth it. Yeah, so I still post some stats from time to time, but I've sort of transitioned from stats into being the prospect guy now. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I like to refer to you as a prospect guru because, you know, you're just on it. From what we were talking about before recording, for people that don't know, on Twitter, he'll make a list every single day for all the prospects that are currently playing for the Rangers in all aspects of Europe and still in the States playing in college, among other things. Just does a great job, has met literally more prospects I can even begin to tell you, especially regarding the Rangers, and just such an awesome story as it is. But Steven, so as we know, we kind of have somewhat of a grasp of when the 2020 season is going to start for the Rangers. So the biggest question now is, how is everything going to shape up? And that's what I wanted to talk about today with you, is really giving an idea as to what expectation we can have with not just the roster configurations, but also gain a grasp of really who's going to be put where, what we can expect from them, including the rookies in Lafreniere, Shesterkin, how the defense is going to look, and really gain an idea with the expanded roster format that we may very well see with the guys that maybe originally weren't going to be on the roster, let alone the lineup, that now find themselves in a better spot because of having an expanded roster.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, so I guess to start off for the Rangers, when we look at their forwards, we obviously have the idea for the top line. This is already where things kind of get tricky because you have Alexis Lafreniere. We know the guy on the wall behind me, former first overall pick. Where is he going to be implemented for the Rangers? There's a lot of fans that would love to see him already on the top line, cooking alongside guys like Zibanejad and Buchnevich. There are other guys that would really maybe like to see him on the second line and on the third line. Where do you think Lafreniere is going to be best suited for the Rangers at this point in time, barring any trades or anything like that that could alter the roster?
Well, before we start, we need to establish which line is the first line for the Rangers. Is it the Panarin line or the Zibanejad line?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, if I had to assume as of right now, I would say that it's still the Panarin line. Pardon me. The Panarin line is the second line because of how it worked last year. You know, between Strome and Fast, we know Fast is gone now, and we'll branch on that and, you know, who's going to fill his spot on that second line. But I think the Rangers are still going to feel confident having Panarin and Strome on the second line, which means Zibanejad and Buchnevich are more than likely going to be on the top line still.
Yeah. So I think, look, there are two different things here. There's what David Quinn might do and how I would like to see it. Because I don't think Lafreniere is going to start in the top six, especially with on the left side Panarin and Kreider. Kreider just signed a 7-year extension.
Yeah,
he's here for the long haul. And even though the Penguins 3-4 years ago won 2 cups with Kessel on the third line, I don't see Kreider being on the third line for the Rangers.
It just wouldn't make sense.
It wouldn't make sense. Maybe if he has a really hot start, they might move him up, but it's a really hard sell to put you put Kreider, your long term investment on the third line, literally like the first full season after he signed his extension. But if it were up to me, I would have Panarin, Strome, and Kako on one line, Lafreniere, Zibanejad, and Buchnevich on the second line, and then Kreider, Hedel, and either Di Giuseppe or Gauthier on the third line. Because by doing that, you are limiting your young players to just one per line. If you put Kreider with Zibanejad and Buchnevich, the KZB line that everybody loves, you're going to be in a situation where your third line will be Lafreniere, Hedel, and then either Gauthier or Di Giuseppe.
Yeah, not the best looking when it comes to actually veteran leadership on that front.
Do you really want a third line where your average age is basically too young to order a beer at a bar?
Yeah, especially if Gauthier is in that line. Yeah, exactly.
If Di Giuseppe's on that line, you can maybe make it work, but
I don't think the Rangers are valuing Di Giuseppe as a third liner at this point in time, at least.
No. But I think the fourth line is pretty much Lemieux, Howden. So every line, 2 out of 3. You have Panarin and Strome paired together, Zibanejad and Buchnevich paired together, Lemieux and Howden paired together, and then the third line will be Hedel. But who is Hedel going to play with?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course you have guys like Rooney and Blackwell that might pick up a fourth line role if there's an injury or a player being traded away. And yeah, the young guys that we'll get into in a minute. I don't see any rookies aside from Lafreniere making the lineup on opening night on offense.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think when it comes to Lafreniere, I was under the same initial impression that it would kind of be hard to see him already in the top 6 because we know how David Quinn is with his coaching style, especially, every opportunity for the most part you need to earn. So if you do great in camp, fantastic. If you do great in practice, fantastic. You are more than likely going to find yourself in better opportunities on the ice, but you need to start somewhere. But there is also the exception with Lafreniere being Lafreniere. He's by no means on the same spectrum as really any other rookie that has come the Rangers' way under this David Quinn regime. Even Kaapo Kakko, there's no doubting that Lafreniere is a better player as of right now between the two. And we'll see how they will go into next season. We're going to talk about Kaapo plenty in this video, but Lafreniere, to me, it's tough because Kreider, again, it reminds me a lot of a situation almost like the New York Islanders, if you will, because if you look at their captain in Anders Lee has found himself on the third line plenty of times, especially with his underperformance. I kind of see certain aspects where, yes, Kreider could find himself in a similar spot if he does, say, slump after starting off the season, let's say 10 games in, or whatever it may be, and Lafreniere's thriving in the bottom 6. All right, then you have a good argument there. But outside of that, it's really difficult, and the Rangers are not the team. It wouldn't make a lot of sense to them either to move Kreider to the right wing. They could do it, but Kreider is known for going around down those left boards and really making things happen with that forehand shot. So again, it's tough. I think Lafreniere would probably start on that third line, but there is a fair argument to be had on the second because I also don't see the Rangers not having Julien Gauthier on the third line to start the season. Assuming that he at least has a strong camp, nothing overly flashy, just really as advertised, because the Rangers, they want to know exactly what they're getting in a guy like Gauthier because he's going to be exposed for the expansion. So they want to make sure if he's really the real deal after what they traded with Joey Keane just a year ago, well, not a year ago, almost a year ago now, it feels like, with the Carolina Hurricanes, that if Gauthier is going to be a pivotal part to their organization going forward, he needs to be given the opportunity. So I don't see him getting a lot of bottom feeder minutes on the fourth line. I think he'll be on that third line, and I think Hedel will definitely be as that third C for at least one more year, barring any changes that happen, whether Strome is possibly dealt, an injury occurs, or what have you. So Lafreniere, I think there's definitely a fair argument to have on the second or third line. First line's probably pushing it, and it is mainly because of Kreider really isn't that flexible with me to move to the off lane. What are your thoughts?
But you know who is, right?
To move on the off lane?
Yeah.
Don't say Panarin.
No, but if you have seen him play, Lafreniere, I would be comfortable putting Lafreniere on the right side.
I would too.
If you can have a better matchup, a better line combination by moving him to the right side, I would be perfectly fine with that. If you have watched him like in the World Juniors, in the QMJHL,
Yeah, he's been on the right plenty.
he's even if he lines up on the left, and this goes for Kako, this goes for Kravtsov, this goes for a lot of wingers in today's NHL, and it kind of goes for Panarin as well. This is no longer the NHL of the late 80s and early 90s where a left winger played solely on the left. You know, they're not staple to one side of the ice. Hockey is much more dynamic. Wingers move from left to right. There's a lot of lateral movement. And if you look at highlights from Lafreniere last season, and also Panarin, to be honest, with the Rangers, a lot of offense from Panarin comes when he skates up the ice on the right side. So it doesn't necessarily mean when you put Panarin on the right side on the team sheet that he's solely playing on the right side. There's going to be a lot of lateral movement between the two wingers, and Panarin and Kako or Panarin and Lafreniere give you the option on a line where with two wingers who are comfortable on either side. So it's not necessarily set in stone that you know the position we assign to a kid like Lafreniere as left wing is going to be the only position he's going to play.
That's a fair point. You know, we see that all the time where they start out and say the left or the right, and they just gradually going into the offensive zone stay on the opposing side. Panarin, what really stands out to me, at least when I see him on the right side, and this is mainly just because of him on the power play, I never really felt comfortable with it. I know that he has made plenty of things happen on that right wing, but especially when I think of special teams, and then you have Zibanejad on the left dot, things just never really clicked, at least when that pair is together, at least not to what we have liked. It's almost like an overload to an extent when David Quinn is really just hoping to bank on his top guys and then throws them out there constantly to mix things up, where we have seen Panarin a lot on that right wing, and it hasn't been to nearly as much success with him on the left. But I completely get what you're saying with the lateral movement, just starting off on the left wing, but then gradually moving to the right and making things happen. That I perfectly get. And Lafreniere, I'm not against him going on the right wing at all, but I think for the Rangers' sake, I don't believe, and I could be completely wrong, but in my personal opinion, I don't believe that they would be in a position to be fully comfortable moving the kid that they just drafted that wants him to thrive in every which way to essentially his off wing. Even if he's not, you know, uncomfortable there, that isn't what his natural position is. So to do that right out of the jump would be really surprising to me for the Rangers. I think maybe throughout the season, we could see things start to change up a bit, knowing that Lafreniere feels comfortable. Say they have him on the right wing on the power play, for instance, and he's cooking it up, getting 1Ts in that right dot, something of that nature to really give them more comfortability with, hey, he can work on that right wing. That'll give us a better argument to maybe have him in the top 6. Okay. Then that's something there. And then you also have the battle with Kako as well. Because Kako, I think we can transition into him now, where we see him. So I guess if we had to say for Lafreniere right now, we would probably say he's on the third line to start out the season, correct?
Yeah, I think for argument's sake, let's call it middle 6.
Yeah, middle 6. Okay, perfect. All right, so now let's get on to Kako, because he's another big story as well. We know just had over 20 points, arguably the worst season out of all the players in the NHL last year, analytically speaking. The analytics guys love to pick on him, and I get it. I enjoy analytics just as much as the next guy, but I don't think we should put too much stock into that, given the fact that Capo played basically nonstop for over a year straight. You know, he's finally gained time to rest, and that showed big time during his 3-game stint in the qualifying round. I thought he was the best Ranger forward during that stint. I know that there are others that may disagree, but him just having a couple months off was huge for him. So imagining what he's going to do next season, really having all this time off to just focus on himself, keep himself healthy, and really be refreshed for next season. I think we're going to see a Kaapo Kakko that was a lot more expected in his rookie year, and one that very well will find himself in the top 6 to start the season.
Yeah, and I think for what goes for Lafreniere goes for Kakko as well. Depending on how the season starts, if he is a little bit slow to start the season, I wouldn't be surprised to see him on the third line the first couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. We already talked about the fact that Lafreniere is a better prospect than Kaapo Kakko, simply because a first overall prospect in 2020 I mean, I would say Lafreniere is better than Jack Hughes, and Jack Hughes and Capo Caco are basically on the same level.
Oh yeah, this class was better than the 2019 class. I think we
Yeah,
can all agree on that.
exactly. And but on top of that, Lafreniere is only 6 or 7 months older than or younger than Capo Caco.
Mm,
Lafreniere is among the oldest in his draft class. So is Braden Schneider, by the way.
yep.
So it's interesting to see how many older guys went in the first round this year in the draft. But it puts them a little bit closer in terms of age. And I think it just depends on how they start. I do feel that the shortened season is a huge advantage for several players on the Rangers.
I
Um,
completely agree on that one.
Kako Lafreniere, who isn't used to playing 82 games a season,
Really,
but
all the
also,
kids when you think about it.
but especially, and we'll get to that in a minute when we get to goaltending, but for Shesterkin, having a 56 game season where he would probably play 30, maybe 35, is perfect to ease into the transition becoming a starter in the NHL because he has only played more than 30 games competitively once in his career.
Yep. Because
Uh,
he normally had pretty significant tandems during his time in the KHL.
yeah,
You know, there
it was,
wasn't
it
ever
was,
a time where he was like by far getting the bulk of the work.
and it wasn't that he wasn't better than, for instance, Mikko Koskinen, who's now the goalie in Edmonton,
Or even Hellberg.
or Magnus Hellberg, who used to play, who was under contract with the Rangers. It's not that he wasn't better than those two. It's just that this was the system that they used in St. Petersburg.
Yep.
They had a 1A, 1B system where they basically gave almost equal starts to both goalies. And the one exception was, I think, 2015-16, where I think Koskinen had an injury and he played 35 or 36 games. And they don't have an 82 game season in the KHL anyway. So having a shortened season in the NHL is definitely an advantage for the younger guys, and hopefully Kako and Lafreniere can ease into the NHL a little bit without being exhausted at the end of the season.
I think that's exactly what's going to happen, and it's only going to benefit them greatly. And especially with Shesterkin, that's a great point that you add as well, because he hasn't handled a huge workload. So instead of just throwing him to the fishes next year in a first full 82 game season, to have him ease in, get around, say, 30, 35 starts tops, I think that's going to bode well for all of them greatly, but especially Igor. And I'm ecstatic to see what he's going to do. But before we get into really player expectations when it comes to how we think they're going to turn out point-wise, let's expand more on these lines in particular. So let's say for the first line, I don't believe the first line is going to be with Panarin. And if you do, that's perfectly fine. I just want to hear your thoughts on it, because I wouldn't see why the Rangers would start moving Strome and Panarin onto that first line.
Look, for me, there's no real difference between the first and the second line. I think in terms of minutes that they play at even strength, I think it's a wash. It gives the Rangers a great strength to have Zibanejad and Panarin on separate lines.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it matches them up perfectly.
If out of those two lines, I would have to rank them. I rank the Panarin line as the first line because Panarin leads the team in points.
Okay, I understand you then. Yeah.
I mean, he was on pace for, I think, 115 points.
No, he was remarkable, and he had 95 last season.
He had 95. If there was a full season, he would have hit triple digits.
Yeah, no, I think Panarin is, and we talked about this, is really the best free agent signing in Rangers history outside of Adam Graves, for instance, because I believe Graves was offer sheeted by Edmonton. I could be wrong, but I do believe from what I've read that was the case for the Rangers. So outside of Graves and probably a couple other players that just aren't currently on my mind, Panarin has really stood out, like better than expected. At least in my mind. Like, he's just been amazing. Now he's in a spot now. So, okay, just for instance, let's just imagine that the Rangers still top line is Kreider, Zibanejad, Buchnevich. It's KZB. Okay. Second line, then you're going to have Panarin, Strome, and then Kakko. So that third line, even though it might be suspect, and it probably wouldn't make too much sense to start off, you have Lafreniere, Hedl, and Gauthier. That is a very suspect line, and I don't think it would hold true for very long of the season. I think maybe it would just be to start things out because they want to see how Kakko starts to bode well in the top 6, because I have a feeling he will play the majority of the season in the top 6 next year, unless Lafreniere blows him away and can play on his off wing no problem, and then that could be the only argument to have, say, a guy like Kakko staying on the third line because Lafreniere is playing ahead of him on the second line. So then you get to the fourth line, and this is where things get very interesting because you obviously have Lemieux. He's going to be in that lineup for sure. Then you have Howden, and then you have really a spot that can go numerous ways for the Rangers, and with a lot of guys that are going to be competing for a fourth line spot as it is. But between having guys, whether it's going to be Kevin Rooney, who can play the right wing, as a matter of fact, he plays center, but he can play the right wing. He can also help kill penalties, so he's a guy pushing for that spot. You have Morgan Barron, who really they can utilize him in any way. You have Justin Richards and you have Patrick Kodorenko. So of those 4 players, give or take, which one do you expect to get the bulk of the time on that fourth line? And also Phil DiGiuseppe, because he just popped in my head. DiGiuseppe's probably the easy winner as of right now, but out of those other ones, which one stands out the most to you to possibly cracking this fourth line?
I think Rooney and Blackwell are not going to be on the team the entire season. To me, they feel more like the Paul Carey type players that are called up, sent down whenever there's an injury or some roster moves.
Paul Carey, and another AV favorite.
Paul Carey. I will love Paul Carey forever because he scored in the Winter Classic.
I was going to just say that. It was funny because I was ragging on this man so hard in the Winter Classic, and my buddy Jonas sitting next to me, and I'm just like, I'm going ballistic just on Paul Carey, just for fun, like just because I can. And then he goes and scores the goal, and I'm just like, I don't even care. And I'm like, come on, it has to be Paul Carey. But go ahead.
These Winter Classic games always have the weird players scoring goals. Mike White, Rangers, yeah. Oh, the Yager salute.
Yeah.
Amazing. Anyway, so Rooney and Blackwell, they might make one of those might fill that right wing spot on the fourth line early on. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Rangers target someone in a trade to bring a little bit more experience to the lineup.
I could see that. It's kind of funny that you mentioned that, in fact, because there was a guy that stood out to me that I think would have been phenomenal for the Rangers, even though they don't really have any money to kind of make it happen, in Melker Karlsson. And he ended up just signing with AIK. So I don't believe he's going to even be participating in the 2021 season, because I know he's finishing off the remainder of the season with AIK at least. So, but he was a guy that really stood out to me because he's really defensively sound. You don't need much of any offense out of him. He was doing well with the Sharks last year. Just a random thought that came to my head regarding him.
So we'll see what happens on that fourth line, but there's a pretty good chance, like you said, that DiGiuseppe is going to be on the third line, and the fourth line will be what I call the expansion draft line, where the Rangers have to make a choice which one out of those 3 to protect.
If it's not Lemieux, then I don't know what to do. It's tough.
Okay, so are they going to expose Gauthier a year after they traded for him?
No, they're not. They're not. They're absolutely not. The only way that they're going to expose Gauthier is if he does not at least perform to the caliber of being a third line winner throughout the majority of next season. He's going to be given every opportunity. I don't see how he doesn't. He has the frame. The guy is literally a monster. If you look at his genetics as well, he has a great heritage tree when it comes to his family and like just how built they are. But he's literally so athletic as it is. He's just a guy that's really taken his time to hit the AHL level. Former first-round draft pick in 2016, has done everything at the AHL level. Now it's time for him to really get that next step. And he really hasn't had too much of an opportunity with the Carolina Hurricanes because they've had a solid roster for these past couple of years now. No shame on him. So with the Rangers, the opportunities are there. I don't see them exposing him whatsoever. So,
and especially because they gave up Joey Keane, a player who's exempt.
A very solid prospect, might I add, too. Yeah. The only reason why they gave him up is because they were able to get rid of a guy who was really behind of a lot of other defensemen, as solid as he was, given the Rangers' depth, and they just used it for a need. You can't go wrong there. Yeah.
But yeah, that fourth line, I mean, anything can change. Looking at the lineup, I wouldn't be surprised if Buchnevich moves to the third line. You have Kreider and Zibanejad together on their line, where they fill out that line with a young guy like Kako, maybe.
I think Booch would make the most sense on the third line. Not to start out, but I could see it happening, especially if, say, Lafreniere is thriving. Because Booch is a guy that, I love him. I've always been a huge fan of his, but he's had those somewhat moments of just being that stereotypical Russian to me. At least he leaves me wanting more, even though analytically speaking, he's not bad defensively. He's actually pretty sound. He was actually one of the better forwards for the Rangers last year, overall speaking, not just with his playmaking, but his overall 200-foot game. So he's one that is kind of hard to read, and I think his ceiling, we could all probably agree, is in that 45, 50-point range, unless he really blossoms as a late bloomer. I just hope that for his sake, he would be able to handle a third line with a young kid with Hedel. And, if Lafreniere is still there, even though I don't think that would be the case, it would maybe be Gauthier being on his off wing or Di Giuseppe. I'm not sure exactly how much Buchnevich would produce. That's probably that would be the biggest question mark for me. Can he thrive in a third line role with having forwards that are either a lot more inexperienced or just not to nearly the same level as what he's been accustomed to playing in the top six?
Yeah, and it all boils down to, does Lafreniere and Kako, do they play well enough to earn a top six spot? Because they have to earn it, of course.
I think I can bet money on it that at least one of them does.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then it's, I mean, if only one of them does, then the other one will be on the third line. If both do, then we have to choose between Kreider and Buchnevich. Who's going to go to the third line?
Yeah. And again, it would really be hard to see Kreider do it. The only exception, and I don't understand why teams don't do it. Like, I understand why, but I really hope for Quinn's sake that, especially as this rebuild continues, but is starting to blossom into really starting to become playoff contenders over the next couple of years, assuming Quinn is still head coach, that he really starts to roll these lines better. Because if you can tell, obviously, that he likes to roll his three lines, especially in a game where things just simply aren't going right. He mixes lines up in every which way just to try to get something clicking, and he completely forgets or gives the idea of what a fourth line is. So that is probably the biggest question mark that I have with Quinn and utilizing this bottom six, because if he is going to, in fact, balance the lines better, especially that third line, then I think there's a much better argument to be had with having one of Kreider or Buchnevich there, knowing that they're all getting fairly equal opportunity, with the main stars being on the special teams or just being in those key moments a little bit more, maybe towards the latter half of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also think, too, with the defense now, if you want to go on transitioning to that, that's a big question mark for the Rangers. And, everyone's been livid and upset about Jack Johnson, making memes left and right about him. It would be nice to say that he's going to be strictly seventh defenseman, but I highly doubt the Rangers tossed $1 million that they could have really used on that one-year deal for him not to play probably on that third pair. So if I had to guess the Rangers pairings right now, and you can feel free to chime in and let me know your thoughts after, the first line would probably be, I could very well see it being either I know that I think Lindgren and Fox are going to stay together. Whether that's on the first pair or the second pair, I think that that's going to stay the same, because they really did well beyond expectations for that rookie pairing. Truly amazing, if you ask me. And a great balance, too, because Lindgren is obviously more hard-nosed, staying behind when Fox can bring up the rush and really make things happen. But the interesting factor here,
and they have a really long history together as well.
They do, exactly, playing together through Team USA as well, correct?
Yeah, and the NTDP.
Yep. And
where they played together with Patrick Kodorenko, actually.
Oh, I didn't know that. See, now I learned something new today. But I think what'll be interesting, though, for the Rangers is, what do they do with Tony D? Because there's a lot of expectation that they very well could pair Tony on the left side and have Trouba on the right. On the first glance, that looks like a disaster for the defensive side of things. At the same time, there is a very fair argument to be had with Tony making sure that he is in a top four role, knowing that he's getting this big contract, AV of 4.8 mil for 2 years. I highly doubt that they're going to keep him solidified on that bottom pair of defense unless they are really rolling things out well. I think that they would be fine putting Tony on the left side because, one, he played it for the majority of his time in juniors leading up to the NHL. So it's not like he doesn't have a familiarity playing on the left side, let alone having success. So the biggest question for me is that in fact going to happen for the Rangers between him and Trouba? Because Trouba really looks subpar at times defensively. His transition game was really behind two steps for a lot of the parts of the first season with the Rangers. I think that there's still plenty of potential there. He's only 25, 26. I'm not too worried. It was his first year, no biggie. But between Tony being more of an offensively minded defenseman and Trouba, who's known for his offense as well, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think Trouba's game improved once Brady Shea was traded.
I think so too. They weren't.
I know they're friends. They wanted to play together, but they weren't a good fit together.
Definitely in part because they're so offensively minded.
Yes, and that's why I wouldn't pair D'Angelo with Trouba. I have no problem with D'Angelo on the third pairing if you feed him a lot of power play minutes,
which is what they did last year. So yeah, and I wouldn't be against that either. Again, I don't know exactly what Quinn's mindset is and if that's the direction that they want to go in, knowing that they have Tony on basically this prove-it contract now. So they want to make sure that he's given all the opportunities to really succeed and blossom outside of his breakout year this past season.
Yeah, and I think they're first to start the season. I think they're going to stick with the pairing that worked well in the qualifying round, Smith and Trouba together.
Okay.
And then the third pairing would be Johnson and D'Angelo.
I mean, when you look at things, if Johnson wasn't as much of a quote-unquote dumpster fire as what everyone perceives him to be, it wouldn't be a terrible idea because Johnson, he is not offensively driven. We know this. He is a stay-at-home defenseman through and through, especially at this point in his career. He doesn't have the legs like he once does, and he could really just let D'Angelo go up and cook. I'm not against that. What I am worried about is Johnson not being able to help out with Tony's lack of defensive play. Now, do I think Tony is going to continue to get better as a defender? I do. I think there's still so much there with him. He had a monster year last year, and granted, defensively, he wasn't fantastic, but he was by far the best in his career to date, which is promising of what we could see next season. But Johnson, I don't know how that's going to fare them. It almost could be a detrimental line for the Rangers unless they be very strategic in how they utilize it.
Yeah, see, the only thing he needs to do is be better than Mark Stahl.
Correct. But that's the thing. Is he better than Mark Stahl? That is the biggest question, if you ask me. And I don't know.
I'm not going to lose sleep over Jack Johnson being signed by the Rangers for 1 year. It's a 1 year contract.
Yeah, neither am I.
It's a stopgap in case the prospects don't work out. And honestly, when it comes to defense, our prospects are basically Tarmo Reunanen and Keandre Miller. I don't think Miller is ready to jump straight into the NHL. He's not on that level of Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes.
I will say this, however, not to cut you off, just to add about Miller, is that I have seen reporting, especially from Chris Drury and John Davison, that they really do view Miller highly and the impact that he could have as soon as in camp. So I just want to mention that because I'm under the impression that Miller won't have much of an impact for the Rangers next year because of the salary bonus and everything. But I just want to throw that out there.
It's like a salesman trying to sell his own fruit,
Yeah, no, you're not wrong.
I mean, you're not going to hear Chris Drury or John Davidson say, "Oh, we think Andre Miller needs to play in the AHL for 2 years."
Of course not. Yeah.
They're not going to say that. No, they picked this kid in the first round 2 years ago. They signed him to an entry-level contract after a very mediocre season in college. Mm-hmm. Let's be real. Do I think he will make his NHL debut this season? Possible. I don't think he makes the team out of camp. I just don't see it happening, mostly because of who we have on defense. Are you going to pair him with Jacob Trouba? No. Are you going to pair him with D'Angelo?
No.
No. The only right-handed defenseman he would work well with is Adam Fox.
Of course, because Fox is I've talked so highly of Fox for a while now, but it's so hard not to. This man is so phenomenal with his transition game. Every single night, he left me jaw dropped. Truly, seriously, he is ridiculous. I don't know how else to put it. There is no other defenseman for the Rangers really in recent history outside of Ryan McDonough that is as balanced as this man right here. That is only getting better. So I completely agree with you that Fox is the only truly capable righty as of now, but who knows what the future is going to hold.
Yeah, and that's the thing. D'Angelo and Truba need a left-handed defenseman that is steady in his own zone. And for all the good things that Keandre Miller brings to the game, being good in your own zone is not something he's known for. He is a very offensive-minded defenseman. He's
Yeah,
good
he
at
was a winner 4 years ago.
Yeah, and he skates really well. He has great reach. But is that enough to jump straight into the NHL after 2 seasons in college? The second of which was, kind of mediocre on a bad Wisconsin team. I don't know. I still think Tarmo Reunanen, even though he doesn't have the high ceiling Keandre Miller has the inside track out of the two to make the team. I've spoken to him a few times, and he and the Rangers decided that they only wanted him to sign a short-term loan deal in Finland. There were teams interested in Liga to sign him for the whole season, and they decided not to. The fact that the Rangers and Reunanen went this route proves to me that they feel that he's close to making the team. He was one of the final cuts last year after preseason. He spent another full year in Finland. He might not be your top pair defenseman, but if Smith plays with Trouba, and you have to pick between Reunanen and Johnson, if Reunanen can outplay Jack Johnson, that's huge. That's a bonus. And which brings me to my final point. We complain about Jack Johnson a lot, and he reminds me a little bit of Adam McQuaid that the Rangers traded for a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
There was no real need for Adam McQuaid and this and that. Here's the thing. If your prospects are not good enough to outplay a guy like Jack Johnson is not your problem.
Correct.
Could you have signed a better defenseman? I don't know. Was there a better defenseman available? Who knows? You could have acquired one in a trade, but Jack Johnson signing for 1 year proves to me that it's just a stopgap. This is not a player.
Kind of setting the bar now that you say it in this manner. And
Johnson's setting the bar, and if your prospects cannot outplay Jack Johnson, then Jack Johnson is not the issue. Then your prospects are just not as good as you as a fan base think they are.
Yeah. The only supposition I would have to that, however, is, everything that we see with Brett Howden, for instance, and, his supposed favoritism by David Quinn, and, how he hustles so hard in practice. And it doesn't matter how he did in his past 15 games. By God, was he amazing in practice. So he's going to continue to get some ice time. So I think that would be my only counter to
that's
it.
That's a different discussion. That's a different discussion.
No, okay.
If we are going to record in a couple of weeks for 30 minutes talking about David Quinn, I will go into all this.
Okay.
But let's just for argument's sake, assume that the coach makes the right decisions.
Yes.
If Keandre Miller and Tarmo Reunanen and Anthony, what's his name? Bitetto?
Oh yeah, Bitetto. Yeah, he's fringe NHL player.
Yeah. If they cannot outplay Jack Johnson, like I said, Jack Johnson's not your issue.
Yeah.
The issue is that you don't have a better player than Jack Johnson.
Agreed. Completely agree. And again, I understand the frustration with people, including myself, because normally when you see a coveted prospect with the roster and you say a healthy scratch, you're like, come on, just throw him in there. It's like you're not even purposely pushing for playoffs this year, so why not just give him some ice time and see what happens? But at the same time, you're completely right. That's not exactly how you should always do things. You could be rushing a player who's not necessarily ready or really hasn't deserved it, and it could give him a false expectation, a false hope that, hey, I earned it, I should be here, and then it's smacked right in front of his face. So, those are all great factors in really breaking down Johnson. And I think when it comes to Tarmo too, we've talked about him plenty. I think he's definitely going to be the Ryan Lundgren of last season for the Rangers. He's going to kind of come out of nowhere, and I truly believe he's going to make somewhat of an impact for the Rangers. It won't be easy because he does have plenty of other defensemen along the lines of him when it comes to where they are currently at and cracking that bottom pair, but Tarmo on that bottom pair along D'Angelo, I think that's something that could really succeed. I've watched some more clips and game. I know you've seen him plenty, and you literally know the guy. You guys have had plenty of conversations. How would you best describe Tarmo's game, and how do you think it will transition to the NHL?
Tarmo is not the guy that lays out the hits. I remember last season when the Rangers played the Islanders, there was that huge hit in open ice by Jacob Trouba on Michael Del Col. I'm not sure if you remember that, but that's not the type of hit you expect from Tarmo Reunanen. He is a smooth skater, moves the puck well, and again, I wish the Rangers would have another player like Lindgren or another player like Fox, because as it stands now, on the left side, there's just a need for another guy like Lindgren. I think Reunanen can be solid defensively, but he would really need to be paired with a good defenseman on his pairing. Reunanen together with Trouba is something I could see. Reunanen with D'Angelo, I don't think that's going to work.
Yeah, no. Okay, fair enough. So maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Something about Tarmo really comes off as a wild card for me, but one that from being one of the last cuts last year in camp to really progressing well, currently playing in Europe still, he just stands out as a guy to me that could very well have a fairly crucial part to the Rangers over these next 3, 4, 5 years. He's a guy that, he wasn't a high draft pick, as we know. He isn't on the same level of coveted defensive prospects that we all love for the Rangers' sake of things in their prospect pool, but he's just one of those that, again, just stands out to me, similar to Ryan Lindgren in that aspect. Not so much in their game, just so much as going under the radar and is going to surprise a lot of people and eat minutes. I think that will be crucial for Tarmo next year. But go ahead.
Sorry. So if Reunanen becomes a solid third pair defenseman for the next 3-4 years for the Rangers, that's great value to get in the draft. I think he was drafted in the 4th round in 2016. If you can get a guy who plays 100 NHL games in the 4th round of any draft, that's a huge win. And I know we sometimes get carried away. We want every prospect to be a superstar. We want every defenseman to be the next Roman Josi. We want every center to be the next Sean Couturier or Alexander Barkov. We want every winger to be the next Ovechkin or whatever. But sometimes you have players you get in the draft. They're not superstar players, but they are very useful. And if you can have them for a couple of years, like Jesper Fast, have them in your lineup, then you should be happy you found a guy like that in the draft, a guy you didn't have to trade assets for.
Yeah, that's another completely fair point. And I think one last thing to put on Tarmo before branching out into the goaltenders is that he is in a prime spot now, with even in the competition in front of him, that if he does stand out in, say, this shortened season, the opportunities are really going to present themselves for him and possibly for other rookies along the way that maybe weren't necessarily gain as much love or appreciation beforehand. Tarmo could be another one of those guys from the defensive side of things to kind of be a stepping stone to really make sure that you branch out and look at all your options. I know the Rangers are already doing that, but just to do that a little bit further doesn't hurt at all. But
and on the left side, you not just have Reunanen, but you have Matthew Robertson.
And I'm a big fan of Robertson. I like his game a lot.
Yeah. He's already under contract. If he plays in the WHL, his entry-level contract slides for a second time, so we don't have to worry about that. Robertson and Lafreniere are the only ones with slide eligible contracts at the moment. In college, Zach Jones, who, in my opinion, is our second best defensive prospect.
I agree. I think Zach Jones has fairly easily solidified himself above Keandre Miller at this point. As much as I love Miller, I think they all have great potential, but Jones has been more consistent and more reliable, if you ask me.
If I have to rank our prospects on defense, so guys who haven't played in the NHL yet, it would be Lundqvist number 1, Jones number 2, Schneider number 3, Miller number 4, Robertson number 5.
Yeah, and I think that's perfect because it's hard to justify having Schneider any lower than 3 when the kid went 19th overall in a 2020 class that was absolutely star-studded.
Yeah. So and before we move on to the goalies, the last thing I'll say is this. Matthew Robertson on my list is the 5th best defensive prospect. I can probably name 5 or 6 teams off the top of my head where he would be the number one defensive prospect. That's how deep our prospect pool is. And you don't need every prospect to pan out.
Of course not.
Out of those 5, 1 turns into a top 4 defenseman, that's huge. 2, you're golden.
Yep. Yeah, no, exactly. And that's what makes this all more enticing and exciting for us Ranger fans, knowing that we don't need to bank on, say, having that one coveted prospect, the Sean Days of the world, or even Pavel Buchnevich when he first came in the Reigns, because he was by far the biggest name for the Rangers. Like, it was like, oh my God, this kid from Russia, he's looking great. Okay, Sean Day originally too, because of him originally, everything unfortunately that happened with his brother, which is why I think that really drastically hurt his development and following his draft. But he had a lot of potential originally too. So it's nice to see how much things have changed for the Rangers, to say the least. But
yeah, and Buchnevich is probably one of our better draft picks in the last 10 years.
Oh yeah, because he was in the 3rd round. Yeah,
he was a 3rd round pick, 75th overall. In a redraft, he would easily go top 20, maybe even top 15.
Yeah, no, exactly, because he has a very underrated two-way game that has actually gone better each and every year, which is very good to see for a guy of his stature. But getting onto the goaltenders now we obviously have Igor and Yuryev. This is a tandem that we've all been excited and looking forward to. For us that have been following Igor since he was drafted, I believe, was it back in 2015 in the 4th round?
14.
14 in the 5th round. I'm getting the numbers confused.
It was 2014 in the 4th round, and he was the 2nd goalie we drafted that year.
Okay, 2014, the 4th round. So does that mean was Sorokin 5th round? I'm trying to think now. I get them confused all the time because I know whatever. It doesn't matter.
The first goalie the Rangers drafted that year was Brendan Halverson in the 2nd round.
Yeah, I liked Halverson originally, and it was short lived. I'm not even sure if he's playing hockey anymore. Same thing with Mackenzie Skapski, because he had some serious injuries. But not to go on a tangent. Igor Yuryev, a lot of people expect Igor to really compete to be a Calder finalist next year. I think that there's definitely a good opportunity. The only argument that I would have is that it being a shortened season, not knowing exactly how much of the bulk that Igor is going to have, probably should be 30 to 35, as we alluded to earlier in this video. But even then, you don't see goaltenders winning the Calder very often. And with a rookie class like this that I've touched on the channel a lot, unless the Rangers have an unbelievably deep playoff run and Igor really stands on his head to help lead the way, I kind of think it's very far-fetched. My personal opinion, just because I know how the award system works. The Calders are not thrown out to goaltenders too often.
I remember the last goaltender to win it.
And who was that?
Steve Mason.
Yeah, no, he's... we could do a whole video on Steve Mason. he's an interesting story. But
the Rangers have 2 players who are probably going to be top 5 candidates for the Calder in Lafreniere and Shesterkin.
Yep.
Of course, you have Kaprizov in Minnesota. The Minnesota Wild signed him. Quinton Byfield, second overall pick for the LA Kings. If he plays, is probably a good candidate.
I would put Velarde ahead of him.
Velarde is also. I think the LA Kings could have 2 or 3 candidates to finish top 5. I'm not sure Marco Rossi is going to play for the Minnesota Wild.
I really hope he does. I thought he was from the reporting that I was seeing, but nothing's definitive yet.
But I think if he plays in the NHL this season, considering the team he plays for, he will probably get a lot of big minutes. I think Tim Stützle is a dark horse for the Calder if he plays the full season.
Yeah, there's multiple guys from Ottawa.
Yeah, he's injured at the moment, so he might need to recover first. But if he plays for Ottawa and he gets top 6 minutes, which is a lot easier in Ottawa than it is to do on a Rangers team.
Oh, of course.
Or Lafreniere that has Kreider and Panarin in front of him. I think Stützle is a candidate, but it's too early to tell. Last year it was so obvious that it was going to be Makar and Quinn Hughes.
Oh, I know. Yeah. No, this year is you have the 56 game season. So that in itself is just ginormous because you're going to see guys that maybe would go on a slump past that 56 game span, or maybe wouldn't turn things on until after the second half of the season. Everything's different now. But then I think
the shortened season is a disadvantage for the European prospects.
Oh yeah, for guys that were just coming over on loan, for sure.
someone like Lafreniere, who already plays a very mature game, plays a physical game, probably has the easiest transition to the NHL.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and as the consensus first overall pick, he should be the number one. I mean, he should be the number one candidate for the Calder.
No, he should. And you know, again, a good argument would be a guy like Kirill Kaprizov, among others. You know, there's going to be a lot. I'm really ecstatic for this rookie class. I touched on in a previous video, and that maybe that's something that we could talk about on a future video as well, because
Yeah, sure.
these rookies look absolutely insane. Like, I was ecstatic as it is for this class going into next season, but now that Shorin, you know, anything is possible. I have no clue what's going to happen.
We
But that
can
makes
we
it a
can
lot
talk about Sorokin. We can talk about Denisenko.
so many good talents. I'm oozing out the mouth just thinking about it. But
Anyway,
getting back to the
goaltending.
yeah, go ahead.
Goaltending 56 games, 30-26 split, or maybe 32-24 split makes sense. And I'm not sure if this was. I mean, it probably wasn't planned, but it's probably a blessing that we didn't trade Georgiev. Having him as the backup
Correct.
gives us the opportunity to have a 1A, 1B goalie tandem in a shortened season. It's the perfect opportunity for Shesterkin to get used to the NHL. Georgiev can have a good season for the Rangers, and then after the expansion draft, they might trade him.
This could be a tandem of a lifetime for the Rangers. Like, who knows? Like, if you really, as you know, as replaceable as, you know, backup goaltenders, or, you know, a 1B to the 1A can be, Georgiev has been fantastic with a
Yes.
subpar defensive problem. Like, think about the multiple 40 plus, 50 plus save games he had for the Rangers already in dramatic fashion. I think he's going to bode really well with Igor.
But backups, you have to cash in before it's too late.
And that it's really going to come down to how important is that for a guy like him, or is he possibly willing to maybe take a little bit of a hometown discount, if you will, to stay with this team that he knows is in the right direction for the foreseeable future.
But for the Rangers as well, the Rangers also need to evaluate, you know, is this the best time to move on? Because what are we getting in a trade for him? We traded Antti Ranta to the Coyotes. We traded Cam Talbot to the Oilers. And maybe in a year or two, Tyler Wall will be ready to take over from Georgiev.
That's a fair point. Wall does look promising.
And this is why the Rangers keep drafting goalies. And fans often say, why do we need to draft a goalie? We have Shesterkin in that. Yeah. And 6 years ago, people were asking the same thing about Shesterkin. Why did we draft him? We have Lundqvist in that. But goalies take a while. And Tyler Wall in 2 years can take over from Georgiev. And 2 years later, maybe Olof Lindbom takes over from Wall. And 2 years after that, Dylan Garand can be ready. If you have a different backup that you draft yourself, that you develop yourself instead of having to give up picks or having to sign them in free agency, if you have that continuous stream of backup goalies in your system, while Igor Shesterkin is your starter for the next 10, 15 years, I mean, that's a great situation to have in that.
No, you're exactly right. And I've never been this ecstatic for a tandem, probably outside of Talbot and Hank, because I love Talbot, like, with a burning passion. I really enjoyed Antti Ranta too, but Talbot was my man. Yeah, the fact that we had arguments for a while for us Ranger fans if Talbot should be, you know, the next number one over Hank during this time when Hank got injured was just like crazy in itself. But I think
he had a great season when he took over from Lundqvist that year.
He stood on his head every single night. It was phenomenal. But okay, so now we're in a spot here towards the end of this video where it is time to break down what our full expectations are, not just for each individual player, for the most part when it comes to point production, what we think they will do, because it's a 56-game season supposedly, so it's going to be a little bit harder to grasp an idea outside of Mika Zibanejad because of what he did in basically a 56-game season last year, but also how they're going to do in this proposed division. That is not going to be like the normal Metro. So let's start off with the players. We'll just go right down the list. Let's start off with Chris Kreider. 56-game season. What do you think he's going to do?
If he hits 40 points in 56 games, I think that would be a good number for him. That would be around the same average as he would normally have in a full season.
Yeah. I agree. I think Kreider's probably going to range more. I think he's going to go more so towards 35 just because I could see his implementation being messed around with a lot during the season because of Lafreniere, most notably. But between 35 and 40, I would say is definitely fair. Around probably, I would say 15 goals at least. Hoping to push for 20. But we'll see what happens with how they utilize him. Zibanejad. Big question. The man only played, I believe, 59 games just this past season and was on pace for literally record. He led the entire NHL in goals per game on percentage wise. If I just pull up his numbers right now in front of me.
Actually, that's not true.
Okay, who was first then?
Morgan Geekie had 2 goals in one game.
Oh, get out of here. Come on. All right, I should have said at least more than like 4 games. Okay, pardon me. Zibanejad, 57 games played. He had 41 goals for a total of 75 points. What do you think he will do with one less game?
I think he's going to get around 60 points.
Yep.
See, the thing is, it's really hard. He's going
to drop 15?
It's really hard to expect a player to repeat a career year unless that player is a bona fide star like Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, Alex Ovechkin. If they have a career year, you can expect that. When Kucherov had, I think, 129 points at one season.
He dropped over 20 points this past season. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When players have a career year, the wise expectation would be for them to don't expect them to repeat it.
Okay. Yeah, no, you're right. And I think that's fair. For me, Zibanejad, I think the goal scoring is going to die down slightly, but the assists are going to boost up, especially because of Lafreniere and Kakko, assuming that they start to thrive in the shortened season. So in a 56-game season, I'm going to guess that Zibanejad is going to land right around 65 to 68 points, including around, say, 32 to 35 goals. Time will tell. I think it'll be a dip in the goal production just because the Rangers won't necessarily need to bank on him as much outside of what he did just on a night-to-night basis without any different implementation. But next up, because I'm just going down the list through the stats from last year now, Artemi Panarin. Panarin, obviously 95 points in 69 games. For me personally, if I had to pick in the 56-game season, I can probably see Panarin racking up upwards of 78 points. That's probably pushing it quite a bit, but I don't think it's too out of the realm of possibility.
75 to 80 points for Panarin makes sense. And the point I just made, Panarin is one of those star players. Panarin had a career year, yes, but his other seasons were not significantly lower. He's hovering around a point per game in his first 3-4 seasons, and then with the Rangers, it really picked up. I don't think he will keep up that pace, but something around 70 to 75, I would be happy with.
Okay. All right, next up we have Ryan Strome, had 59 points career season in 70 games. In 56 games played, I think Ryan Strome is going to drop to right around 32 to 35.
If he plays with Panarin, it all depends on how Panarin and Strome do. If Panarin has a season where he hits 70 points, I wouldn't be surprised for Strome to hit 40 or 45.
Yeah, no, that's fair. There's something that tells me that Strome will dip from last year outside of the fact of it being 56 games, just putting in perspective of what his points per game percentage would be from this past season to next season. But next up now, we have Pavel Buchnevich, 46 points, a strong season. Less goal scoring, more playmaking ability, though. He definitely looks snake bitten at times in 68 games played. In a 56-game season, I think Buchnevich is going to probably drop right around how I feel with Strome, between 32 or 35, because I don't know exactly how they're going to utilize him in the lineup, and he's a guy who does feel susceptible to me to drop in that bottom 6 throughout the season.
Yeah, between 30 and 40, it depends on how they use him, whether that's the low 30s or the high 30s.
Yep.
But between 30 and 40 makes sense. Yep.
Okay, so I guess we can go to Alexis Lafreniere now. 56-game season. He just came off of his final year playing for the same team that Crosby was most notably from. He had 112 points in 52 games played, including 35 goals and 77 assists. This is the NHL level now. In 56 games, I think Alexis Lafreniere is going to hit 50 points. What's your thoughts?
50 points.
It's a tough task, and I might be getting a little bit ahead of myself, but at the same time, I think that he's really going to do a lot different than, and this is me trying to say this unbiasedly, just from viewing it as a prospect perspective. I almost feel like I'm underestimating Lafreniere because of just how good he is. I think he's going to come in and really not feel uncomfortable right from the jump. So
if he hits 50 points, that's a huge win in a 56 game season.
Oh yeah, that could very well get him the Calder.
Lafreniere has the same issue Buchnevich has. I mean, how is Quinn going to use him?
Yeah. I think,
is he going to be on the
Quinn
third line?
Figure it out fairly quick though with Lafreniere. I think he's going to give him a lot more of a leash too.
Yeah. Is he going to play 10, 11 minutes, or is he going to play 14, 15 minutes with power play?
Yep.
That's going to determine whether or not he cracks 40 or even 50. But with Lafreniere, if he hits 40 or 40, between 40 and 45, I would consider that a successful season.
Yeah. No, I agree. Literally, anything past, I would say anywhere past 35 points, it would be a win, for sure. But if he can go upwards of 50, my guess is that he could push for 20 goals. I think the goal scoring is really going to start to stand out at the NHL level. As good as his playmaking is, I really think that the goal scoring isn't going to be far off either. So I could see more of a balanced type winger with him to start off his rookie season. But next up now, we have Kaapo Kakko. As we know, 23 points in 66 games. Kaapo in a bigger role, assumably more so in that top six in a 56-game season. I can see Kaapo Kakko really ranging around the same numbers as a guy like Kreider that I'm assuming of upwards of 35 points.
Yeah, same with Buchnevich, between 30 and 40, depending on how they use him. If he plays mostly bottom 6 minutes early on, it will be closer to 30.
Yeah. Okay. Next up, we have Adam Fox, 42 points. Such an underrated defenseman in 70 games played in a 56-game season. I think Fox is going to push for upwards of close to 40. I think he's going to take another step in his game next year, and he's going to be given more opportunities than what he was the year prior. Because while he did get power play time, it was more on the second power play, and on 5-on-5, he was gained far less than a lot of the other players until really towards the latter half of, past January of this past season.
Yeah, tough to say with Adam Fox because with these players, and the same goes for Kakko, to be honest.
Yep.
There's this thing called the sophomore slump, and it is really a thing in hockey.
Oh, it is.
We've seen it before. We've seen it before with Michael Del Zotto, who had a great rookie season and then couldn't back it up the second year.
Shea.
Brady Shea is another example. If Adam Fox can overcome that and he can hit 35, I'll be over the moon. But it'll probably be between 25 and 30.
Okay. Jacob Trouba, 27 points in 70 games, 56-game season. Do you think he gets above that 27-point plateau?
Maybe. I think Trouba will have a better season than last year. He's no longer paired with Brady Shea. He will have more opportunities to rack up some points.
Yeah,
because he won't be pinned down in his own zone as much as he was before.
I agree. I think he'll probably get maybe around 25, tops 30, but pushing more so towards 25, which would still definitely be an improvement. Next up, Philip Hedl, 23 points in 60 games. Hedl, a big year for him coming up, and I think he's going to definitely try to take advantage of this shortened season. If I had to guess, especially if Hedl does get some time in that top six, possibly on the wing, or if an injury happens, if Strome finds himself on the third line because things just don't gel well, but either between, his lackadaisical penalties at times or just simply not doing what he did a year prior with Panarin, Hedl in a right opportunity, I could see himself pushing 30 points, but probably more so around 28 if I had to guess.
Yeah, people are probably not going to like what I will say about Hedl, but I think
like it already.
I think his ceiling is not as high as people think it is.
I don't think he has a ceiling of a possible top line center, if that's what you're alluding to. I don't think so.
I don't think his ceiling is even a second line center. I think he's at best a second line winger or a third line center. very similar to a guy like Artem Anisimov. If Filip Hedl can work on his defense and become as good as Anisimov was, that's great value at 21st overall in the draft. Hedl will probably play on the third line, maybe a little bit on the fourth, depending on how Howden does. If he hits 25 points, that would be my expectation. Anything more than that is probably, a reason to a cause for celebration.
Okay. All right, next up we have Tony D, 53 points career high in 68 games, including 15 goals and that hat trick against the Devils. Tony, in the 56 game span, I think he's going to push upwards of 45.
See, here's D'Angelo is kind of similar to Zibanejad in my opinion, that he's not going to be able to replicate that career year, which is something I will bring up later when we talk about the team performance and standings. I think D'Angelo will hit around 30 points.
Okay.
Most of them on the power play.
Okay, next up we have Brett Howden, 19 points in 70 games. I would say in a 56 game season, you could probably get around maybe. I would say. I think he is going to be in a pretty limited role, so I would still put Howden around 15 points.
Yeah, 15 sounds good.
All right, Brennan Lemieux, 18 points in 59 games, so really not far off as to what we would kind of expect. But Lemieux is kind of, pushed back now that Lafreniere's in the mix when you look at things, even though he does, I believe he plays, Lemieux plays left wing, correct? Or am I getting confused? Okay. Lemieux, more known for being on the left wing, probably more so on that fourth line than anything else. I would say it's kind of expected to see him hit upwards of 20, but the opportunities are not going to present themselves for him as much outside of possibly on that second power play unit.
Yeah, I think he's going to hit around 15 points, just like Howden, because if I have to put money on either of them getting top 9 minutes, it's a much easier path for Howden than it is for Lemieux.
Yeah, I agree. Next up, we have Ryan Lindgren, 14 points in 60 games. Not expecting a lot of point production out of him, but I think he's going to get plenty more ice time next year. So I think, honestly, he could find himself probably around that same range again. Maybe even upwards of 17 points. I think that just because of the situations he's going to constantly be in alongside Fox, more than likely, the assists are going to just naturally present themselves to him.
Yeah, I think his assists will mostly be secondary.
Yep.
Around 15 points, between 12 and 15 is probably a good target for him.
Brendan Smith, assuming that he's in a defensive role for the entirety of the season, 62 games played, 8 total points this past year as a winger and a defenseman. As a D partner, I could see Smith racking up probably around 10 points, probably even pushing it there. I think it's just more situational than anything else. Again, another guy that's just going to find some assists come his way. Maybe he'll have a very exciting game out of nowhere, because that tends to happen with every Ranger defenseman at some point.
Yeah, 10 points should be his target. Probably won't hit it, but
Julian Gauthier, probably the biggest question out of all these guys. Assuming that he plays a full season with the Rangers, at least on that third line, he only had a total of 2 points in 12 games with the Rangers last season. I think Gauthier could very well find himself with at least 20 points on that third line. If he gets any significant time with Lafreniere, I think that might very well just be what he needs to propel as an AHL regular.
Yeah, he'll probably be better than last season because he got used to the organization now.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's the other thing. We always talk about, deadline deals, a trade deadline. And we always talk about the successful ones, but there's always stories like Eric Stahl who struggled to adjust to a new team. Imagine what it was like for Julien Gauthier, moving to a team that you have no familiarity with, and you play just a handful of games. It's going to be tough. So if he is off to a better start, I think between 10 and 15 points, similar to Howden and Lemieux, would be my expectation. Anything more than that, I would consider a bonus.
Yeah, I agree. So I guess getting on to guys now at this point that possibly could be in the lineup. We could go down the list of like I don't know, Kevin Rooney, for example, assuming maybe he plays half the season with the Rangers, give or take. Him and DiGiuseppe, maybe they could find themselves kind of rotating, both of them playing around, I don't know, 20 to 25 games apiece, give or take. Who knows? I would say for Rooney, handful of points, nothing crazy, maybe 5 points, whatever. DiGiuseppe could find himself in a little bit more of the point column. Again, it's harder to judge them because we don't necessarily know their roles. Jack Johnson, another guy, you can only expect probably a handful of points. Wouldn't expect a whole lot more. I think we really hit the nail on the head. Same thing with if Tarmo Ronanen does in fact crack the lineup and have somewhat of an impact. And I think before we get on to the goaltenders and how we think they'll do, if you just want to mention one thing regarding the possible expanded rosters, are there any players that stand out to you that would stay with the Rangers roster that maybe initially didn't have much of a shot?
Depends on how big the extended roster is, of course. But the guys we discussed, like Rooney, Blackwell, will probably be on the expanded roster. Someone like, what's his name? I don't know if they actually extended him. Fontaine?
Gabriel Fontaine? I think Fontaine's gone, actually.
I know Fogarty left. He went to the Buffalo Sabres.
Fogarty did leave, but I do, if my memory serves me correct, I believe Fontaine is gone.
Okay. It's tough to say. I mean, any top 6 player in Hartford is probably a candidate to be part of the expanded roster. Kravtsov probably after the KHL season's over. Hayek. Other than that, I think maybe as a third goalie, Kincaid.
Okay, Fontaine still might be with the Rangers. I apologize. There was something about him that just stood out to me that maybe he's gone. But yeah, no, Kincaid, that's another good point. He'll probably be there as that third goaltender. And Hayek, yeah, another guy that, who knows, he's been underwhelming to say the least, and on loan currently in Europe. I don't think that there's much there for him. Defenseman who originally looked promising in his first, game or two with the Rangers, first handful of games at least, up until his injury. He's never been quite the same from what his initial impression was on Broadway.
Yep.
Yeah. No. So, all right, getting on to the goaltenders now, with the assumption that Igor does in fact play 30 games and Georgiev plays, well, actually, let's say Igor plays 33. And then you have Georgiev playing the other half. So 33 out of the 56. How do you think he'll do wins, loss?
Oh, the wins are not going to be as high as people think. With the defense we have, I think Shesterkin might end up with more points than shutouts.
And with how great of a pair of hands he has, I can see it happening
with
too.
the puck mover he is, yeah.
I mean, I saw that man literally practicing slap shots and warm-ups for the Wolfpack last year. He's an animal. I think that's a possibility. I could see Igor having a strong season, definitely solidifying some games single-handedly. To what extent, that's going to be a big question. But Georgiev, I think he's going to have a strong season too. It's really hard to judge the wins and the losses right now, given this roster. I mean, the season.
I don't really want to go into wins for goalies because it's so tough to tell with the division we're in.
Exactly. And we can transition right into there if you want, as to what do you think the Rangers' expectation is with this new proposed division that's going to find themselves with. Do you remember all the teams that are in the division, or should I pull it up quick?
No, it's basically the old division we had, but we replaced the Columbus Blue Jackets and Carolina Hurricanes with the Buffalo Sabres and Boston Bruins.
Yeah. Well, granted, I don't mind not playing against the Blue Jackets or the Hurricanes. They're two pesky teams. Having to go against Boston, don't love that idea. Buffalo is kind of a up and down too, because they did in fact get better during the offseason.
I love having Buffalo or Boston in our division because I think the NHL really has an opportunity here to market this right. With the Chicago Blackhawks and Detroit Red Wings in one division, the Rangers and the Bruins in another, and then the Canadians and the Maple Leafs, all of a sudden you have three divisions with an original six matchup. If they can market this right, they can really sell their product. I like having an original six matchup in the division. I hope they keep it this way.
Well, they always make it huge around, the annual like Thanksgiving game, for instance. It's like Boston and New York don't play a lot, but when they do, there's always this kind of other excitement with it.
How much does a Rangers Bruins game mean on Black Friday if we're not even in the same division?
That's a great point. It always feels weird when it happens because
it feels fake. It feels fabricated. There's no real, aside from the second round in 2013 when we played them in the playoffs. Aside from that, there's no real rivalry between the two over the last 20 years. So I hope they keep it this way, and you keep the divisions the way they are. When Seattle joins next year, just put them in the Canadian division. You would have the Canucks and the Kraken as a rivalry. Perfect.
I can't necessarily get on board with the proposed divisions as a permanent thing, just because I have no clue what to expect from them. But I guess someone who's experienced more than just one division throughout their lifetime, unlike me, I can understand where you're coming from. You have better reference than I do.
And can they please rename these divisions?
Yeah. The
Metropolitan. I saw a tweet where the proposed name for the Rangers division was the Jaromir Jagr division, which
because he's played on like every team.
Because he has played for 6 out of 8 teams in that division. It's perfect.
Oh, it would be great. You'd have the Jagr fans that go to like each of Jagr's games with all different jerseys on there. That'd be funny. But yeah,
the traveling Jagrs. But anyway, the Rangers, I think, will finish probably 5th or 6th in the division.
Okay, so you don't see them making playoffs?
No, and here's why. If I look at those teams, and I would have to list the teams that at the moment are better than the Rangers, it's the Bruins, Capitals, Penguins, Flyers, Bruins, Capitals, Penguins, Flyers, Islanders. Those 5 teams, in my opinion, are better right now than the Rangers. Based on the results last season, it shouldn't be even up for debate.
Okay.
Now, for that to change, you need one of 2 things. Either the Rangers need to improve or one of those teams needs to regress.
Why not both?
Or both. That works too. But it's rare enough for one thing to happen. And we would need to finish top 4. We would need to pass 2 of those teams.
Correct.
So unless we have 2 teams completely implode, I don't see the Penguins, the Capitals, the Bruins, or the Flyers implode at all. Maybe the Islanders, because they lost Johnny Boychuk and they might have some turnover on their lineup. Maybe the Islanders regress. But then the Rangers would still need to stay the same. And as I talked about before, it's really difficult for players that have a career year to repeat that. Panarin, Zibanejad, Fox, D'Angelo. Zibanejad, Panarin, D'Angelo. All 3 had career years. Even if all 3 replicate their year, that's still not an improvement.
Yeah.
It still makes us the exact same team as we were last year from their performance.
I think you're missing one big factor, and you know what that is?
What?
It's your T-shirt.
I know.
I know we
added Lafreniere.
I think Alexis Lafreniere is going to be such a big deal in his rookie year that he is going to propel the Rangers to playoff contention.
Yeah.
I think
players that will improve. Kako will improve. Hedl, hopefully. Trouba will improve. Fox, when it comes to production, might not improve that much, but
his overall game will. It's only good. I feel like it's only up from here.
His overall game will. But the point is, the Rangers have to improve significantly to pass these teams that, as of today, as a starting point, are better than we are. And I'm not saying it's impossible.
While I agree with you, there are a couple advantages to take away before we conclude this video regarding these teams. With it being a 56-game season, and you look at the current state of these rosters in this division, let's start with Boston. They have Pasternak and Marchand healing up from injury. We don't know for sure if they're both going to be ready for the season. They probably will, but assuming at least one of them will be. They have a big issue for multiple reasons. One, they have no clue if their captain's going to be back for another year, so time will tell on that. Because regardless of how Chara has been performing at the age of 40 plus, he's still been a solid defenseman for them and has been a leader in that locker room. You lose your best puck-moving defenseman in Torrey Krug, and you have nothing to replace him with as of now. Trade rumors have been happening with Boston and Calgary. Who knows what will happen after recording this video. But still, when you look at this offense as it is, even with them thriving, Bergeron and Krejci, they aren't getting any younger. They're still going to perform, but injuries will ultimately present themselves, and they aren't nearly as deep as they essentially could be in that bottom six, with a defense that isn't looking nearly as strong as what it was a year ago. And you have Tuukka Rask, who has all the controversy in the world behind him. I don't know what's going to happen with Boston. I think that they will definitely make playoffs, but I'm not completely sold on them being the top dogs like they have been in years prior. And in this shortened season, there is a lot of question marks. Now with Pittsburgh, they're another question mark as well, because they only subtracted and got worse in this offseason, if you ask me. And every year we like to normally downgrade the Penguins because of the fact that, say, hey, they lose a significant winner, or say, hey, they lose when they lost, got rid of Marc-Andre Fleury, whatever it's going to be. They always prove everyone wrong every single year. Last year, up until the playoffs, they were soaring between all the injuries that they endured and overcame them with the guys coming through the AHL from Wilkes-Barre. Regardless, I think the Penguins are going to regress next year. I think
they have one huge addition though in Pittsburgh.
Well, don't say Michael Matheson.
Nope. Jason Zucker is there for a full season now.
That's true. And Zucker is going to do just fine. I think Zucker is going to do as advertised. I don't think it's going to be anything crazy. I think Zucker's a perfect fit for what they want going. The same thing with Brian Rust. You know, they all thrive in that system. And
they got rid of Jack Johnson. That's addition by subtraction.
No, you're right. It is, because they had better numbers on special teams than they did with Jack Johnson, the pitcher, on their PK. Well, I think the Penguins are going to regress next year. I think they are going to be a possible fringe playoff team. The Flyers, I think they're going to thrive. I think the Flyers may very well find themselves possibly winning the division. I think that's how good they are going to be, because they didn't do anything negative really this offseason outside of losing Matt Niskanen into retirement. They're in rumors they would like to add on this roster still and change some things up. I think that they're still trying to go in with typical AV fashion as a top team seed-wise. And then when you get on to other teams in this division as well, let's take the New York Islanders. The Islanders are a big question mark because, one, the Matthew Barzal, that still needs to get figured out. Probably will, but you're losing a key guy in Devon Toews who really helped that blue line. So you're banking on guys like Noah Dobson and others to really make sure that they solidify themselves as consistent defenders in the league next year. It's possible. But then you have that offense that is not really getting any better. They're such a hard team to go up against and read because of how well Barry Trotz coaches. They're just a system team similar to Pittsburgh in that right. But the Islanders, I think the Islanders are going to do well. They probably will, in fact, make playoffs. So I'll say Flyers and Islanders are a lock to make playoffs, right? But then when you get on to the other teams, the Washington Capitals are a big what if. You would think that they're going to thrive and just soar next season. I'm not sure exactly how confident I am in that, mainly because of their defense. Their defense leaves me a little bit worrisome. It's been getting worse these past couple years. And between Hank and Samsonov, that's a really exciting tandem. I'm not fully invested in it, though. And I think with the Rangers between Lafreniere, this young lineup, which in the second half of the season was rolling, I really thought that they would have made at least that second wildcard spot should the season have not been cut short. I think the Rangers are going to find themselves as either the third or fourth seed in the division to make playoffs, mainly because of how much they are rolling with their young talent. And that's a bold take, but that's what I'm going for.
I'll say this. If Panarin, Zibanejad, and D'Angelo can replicate their points per game average of last season, and Lafreniere comes as advertised, then you can count on the Rangers slightly improving compared to last season.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think, and this is a tough division as it is, because outside of the Devils, I think the Devils are probably the only team where we feel comfortable saying they will not make playoffs unless they go on some type of run, but I don't see it happening. The Sabres are a big wild card as well. The mainly because of just how are they going to perform with all these new acquisitions, really trying to balance out this lineup. That's gotten a lot deeper between Eric Stahl, Taylor Hall, adding a little bit. Their goaltending is not looking great, so that's probably the biggest issue for them. But with Dylan Cousins coming in the reins as their top prospect, among others, Buffalo could make some noise to really be pesky and maybe be the reason the Rangers don't make playoffs, for instance. So I think the Rangers, I do believe, in fact, that they are going to make playoffs, but it'll be a huge question as to if they do it because of their riding heavily on Lafreniere having an amazing rookie year, or if they do it because they just steadily progress throughout the season like they did this past year.
Yep, let's hope so. But yeah, a lot of things have to go right for the Rangers to even repeat last season. That's my point.
No, you're exactly right. And I think the fact that they've had a lot of rest, though, too, and just I think that's going to bode well for them. Hopefully, not too much rest to the extent where, their legs are a little tired out to start out things because they just aren't maybe as conditioned. I think the Rangers are going to surprise some people. A lot going into last season, I thought the Rangers would either just miss playoffs or just make playoffs. And they did literally exactly that by losing the qualifying round. So I think the Rangers are going to make it this year. But hey, if they don't make it, no biggie. They're still in a rebuild. I'm not upset. I just want to see the kids start thriving with these veterans around them.
And it would be nice to win a third lottery,
Yeah, no, hey, it's not like there's some significant names in the 2021 draft, because there is, especially those first couple picks wouldn't be a bad idea. I believe for 2021, Shane Wright is the front runner, correct?
Yeah, there are some really good players, though. Michigan actually has some really good players on their college team. Matt Bernier's, Owen Power, and my early favorite, Kent Johnson.
Okay.
There's been a lot of talk about, about other players going first overall, but Kent Johnson is off to a flying start. And I watched quite a lot of him recently because Eric Ciccolini is on that team. And those games were relatively late. So when I couldn't sleep, I just watched those games online. And Kent Johnson has been amazing. I think Michigan might have 3 picks in the top 10. That's how good they are.
Wow. Well, I need to make sure that I'm doing my due diligence on Michigan then. I've seen a lot of highlights with them lately. I know that they are stacked as it is, but, that gave me more incentive to check them out more. So I will definitely do that. But yeah, no, I think we hit everything on the nail of the head. A really exciting season. Oh, go ahead.
One last thing. My wish, if I cannot have the Rangers win the lottery or go far in the playoffs, my wish is for the Penguins to implode and for their first round pick to win the lottery because they traded it to the Minnesota Wild.
You think the Wild are going to get that lucky again?
The Minnesota Wild have never had a first overall pick.
No, I know. Well, the Wild, what ticks me off about them, however, though, and not to get on a tangent, is the fact that they had a phenomenal draft, mainly because players kind of fell in their lap, if you ask me. Marco Rossi, when he's available at 9, you have to be a madman not to take him. And then when you get Murat...
Kusnudinov.
Yes, in the second round. Beautiful. And then when they got Ryan O'Rourke as well, the defender, they had a really great draft. Their off-season moves as a whole, didn't love them, didn't hate them. Looking back on the Nick Bonino trade, it made a lot more sense because they got that pick to get Murat in the second round. But outside of that, between the Eric Stahl trade, kind of left me shaking my head a little bit. Nick Bukestad, they did strictly because they got him for nothing. He's from the University of Minnesota. He's going there back in his hometown to, compete for a top 9 spot. They have a lot of just so-so players and a team that isn't fully committing to a rebuild. So that is my biggest issue with them. I would kind of prefer if they went more in a direction. But at the same time, we'll see what happens. They had a great draft. They have 2 rookies more than likely to be in the NHL next year in Rossi and Kaprizov. Kevin Fiala looks like a huge steal for them looking back because Granlund just never panned out with Nashville. Who knows where he's going to land. But,
The Minnesota Wild, I said this on my podcast earlier this year in one of the episodes. The Minnesota Wild are basically the side salad of the NHL. It's on the table, but nobody cares. Yes. They're never good enough. They're never good enough to go far in the playoffs. They're never bad enough to pick high.
And they're so frustrating because of it. Like,
Yeah.
pick a side. And that's the exact same way I feel about their direction currently. Because when you look at what they did in the Jason Zucker trade, it was brilliant, and they got a great defensive prospect in Cale Addison, who very well could be competing for a spot on the roster. It won't be easy because they have a deep defense as it is, but if they do in fact trade a guy like Matt Dumba, opportunities are going to present themselves to a guy like Addison. But yeah, no, they have a great prospect.
So let them win the first overall pick with the Penguin selection then.
Okay, all right, fine. You know what? I'll decide. We'll make it happen.
All right.
The question is, before I let you go, who would they have to trade
What do you mean?
in order to, let's say a trade is the Penguins implode and they win the first overall pick, but that pick goes to the Wild. Let's assume that
they already own it.
Yeah.
They already own it.
Correct. But I'm saying, how did they own it? What player did they trade away? It's not Jason Zucker.
Yeah, it is Jason Zucker. He was traded for a first-round pick.
You're right, because they opted for the 2021 first-round pick. Correct.
They opted to keep their first-round pick this year, so they're giving him up next year.
Correct. I'm picking up what you're putting down, and now I want it to come to fruition. So, yeah.
There you go.
All right, there we go. All right, I think that's a wrap. This was a great conversation. Thank you so much again, Steven. We will definitely be talking again soon about the New York Rangers. If you want to give your tabs again and let people know where they can find you on Twitter, I still have it available here on the screen, but your podcast or anything else that you would like to do for your closing thoughts, by all means, please go ahead.
Yeah, just mostly my Twitter. statboy_Steven. Give me a follow. Hit me up on DM if you have any questions. My DMs are open. So yeah, if you need any help, any information on prospects, I have people reach out to me with questions all the time. So.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you again so much, Steven. Let's go Rangers. Really exciting time to be a Rangers fan and to see what the 2020 season is going to hold in such an unprecedented time.